Hey everyone, welcome back to the Colony Pit where we reconnect with our favorite colony friends and alumni. And right now we have part two with Rich LaMotte. And Rich was just going through his time in the village of Colonie with his friends there, enjoying his time in high school. And then I didn't get a chance to ask you, what was your SAT score? I'm always curious. It's one of my
Oh
things I
man.
always just want,
Oh,
want to know is people's SAT scores.
yeah.
And then after that,
772, I think it was.
oh, it's not
Yeah.
bad. Not
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't
Then
great.
after
Like I said, no, I wasn't wearing anything around my neck graduation, but I mean, hey, I think I did okay anyways in life.
nice. And then after that, Rich followed Jeff Clark to the Air Force recruiter. Next thing you know, he finds himself in Italy, and then he does a couple years in Guam. And after that, his next pit stop is in London, England. So, Rich, what's going on in London, England?
So England, I'm working in an aircraft parts store. I get there in 1997 and loving life. I'm doing really well. I'm happy. I make a couple ranks that I wanted to make. And, I'm 82 miles away from London. So I'm spending my weekends in London, the capital, and just loving England in every aspect. Little did I know that England would have such a change on my life and the rest of my life that what was to come. But I was working the graveyard shift, and the grave shift, you started at 11 o'clock and you worked until 7 in the morning. In the aircraft parts store, I get a call in the middle of the night from an old supervisor. And he says, "Hey man, we are looking for flight attendants. He was a flight attendant up on Air Force One, and we're looking for special air missions flight attendants." And I'm like, "What is that?" Now, mind you, I had been in the military 9 years already, had no idea that on our airplanes that we fly our nation's leaders on, they're actually active duty military members that are on board the airplanes. No civilians at all fly on the Air Force airplanes. Had no idea. This guy was in supply with me. He was like 6 foot, big, huge black guy, no body fat, super muscular. I'm like, "Dude, you're a flight attendant? What is all that about?" And he's like, "Yeah, it's not like that. Let me tell you about this." And at the time, Mrs. Bush, Laura Bush, was coming to England. And he said, "We're going to be coming through with the First Lady. Come out and see the airplane and, check out what we're all about." So the First Lady did come through for a quick visit. I saw the airplane. My friend gave me a tour. And as soon as I walked up the steps of these blue and white aircraft, I said, "This is home. This is how do I do this?" Again, that same attitude that I had about Air Force entertainment. How do I change a career field that I've been doing for 9 years and swap career fields and do what would be the greatest job anyone could ever ask for in the Air Force? I applied, went to Washington, D.C. for the interview, which was a week long. So to get
Wow.
this job, it was a week long process of series of interviews, meetings, social gatherings. They literally watched me from the moment I got off the airplane at Reagan National to the time I got back on the airplane. The guys who were picking me up at the airport actually Sam Fox material. Now, Sam Fox, you might see you see the fox above me up there. Sam Fox is the logo of the base. It's the logo of Joint Base Andrews, and so they were wanting to see if I was going to fit into what is the greatest job ever. I was lucky. I got hired. And I ended up going to Washington D.C. and Joint Base Andrews in January 2002. So we would be in the Bush administration now. That's George W. Bush, and I would end up spending the last 6 years of President Bush's administration flying everybody. So that would be the first family, the first lady included, as well as the Secretary of Defense, the Speaker of the House, congressional delegations, you name it, I flew them. If they were in the president's cabinet, they are afforded the use of Air Force airplanes for their travel. It is traveling international diplomacy is what the mission of Joint Base Andrews is, and that's spreading that diplomacy worldwide. So not only our president uses the blue and white airplanes, but all of these people as well, because there are so many different aspects of government that have to be represented worldwide. Got to do that job. My principal and primary aircraft was this airplane that's right here, and that's the Gulfstream airplane. So the Gulfstream is this is a G550. The Air Force had 12 of these when I got there at the 99th Airlift Squadron at Joint Base Andrews. This was my primary aircraft. Now, this airplane, you probably wondered who would fly in this airplane. Mrs. Bush would use this airplane. The First Lady would use it. The Vice President would use it quite often, especially under the Bush administration, because Vice President Cheney was from Jackson Hole. So Jackson Hole, we'd go there often with the Gulfstream. Spent a lot of time on this airplane, flying all around the world, and then I would end up being on the big airplane, which is here behind me as well. The airplane, as you guys know, is Air Force One. Although as it sits there or up in the picture or on the news, it is not Air Force One. What a lot of people don't realize is the airplane is not named Air Force One. Air Force One is actually the code name. When the president is on board, that's it. That's the only time it's Air Force One. Otherwise, it's just a special air missions. And in this case, it's 29,000, or its twin sister, 28,000. So that's the tail number of the aircraft. So it doesn't become Air Force One until the president is actually on board. And that has been since Harry S. Truman. So the
Oh, wow.
President Roosevelt was our first traveled president on a jet airplane. Harry S. Truman was where they switched it to Air Force One, because he was flying one day from Florida and they couldn't get clearance into Washington, D.C. They cleared another airlines before they did. And they said, we got to figure out something to fix this. And what they did is they came up with the code Air Force One that would entitle the president to them to know it was the president without having to say on the system, it's the president. The blue and white color scheme came from the Kennedy administration. Mrs. Kennedy thought that the airplane was a little too regal looking when it's silver, orange, and black striped. So she changed it. She got with a designer and changed it to the blue and white that we see today. The blue representing the blue skies, the white representing the clouds. And if you look at the side of the airplane where it says United States of America, it's actually the same font as the title of the Declaration of Independence.
Oh,
Nice.
wow.
Yeah.
That's an unbelievable story. That's an awesome story.
Yeah, so 6 years with them, and then all 8 years with the Obama-Biden administration. So total of four sitting, because then Vice President Biden, who would now be our president now, but countless other former presidents, President Ford, President Carter, President and Secretary Clinton were frequent passengers, as well as George H.W. Bush, and when he was obviously after office. So if the president mandates the former presidents to be the use of the airplane for an official function, then we would fly them as well, go down to pick them up for various things.
Right. I guess two questions. First is, how much advance notice would you get about a flight that you had to serve on? Would you just ever get a call in the middle of the night and be like, we're leaving in 3 hours, or would you kind of know in advance?
Many times. So we would have what they call alert, and you would sit alert 3 days in a row. You wouldn't be allowed to sit any longer than 3 days, but that's a 24/7 alert, and it's 2 hours from phone contact to takeoff. So bag when you know you're on alert, you would your bag was in the car, packed, ready to go, uniform ready to go. On the airplane as a flight attendant, all of our aircrew members, we wear civilian clothes. We don't wear military uniforms on board the airplane, and that's done for two reasons. It's done for the safety aspect and for the security aspect, but also more importantly, it's done for the rank structure so that there is no rank divide on the airplane. So as Rich LaMotte, I could say to the vice president, sir, I need you to sit down and put your seatbelt on, versus Senior Master Sergeant LaMotte telling the vice president to sit down. So there was no rank. So a lot of times, especially our civilian guests, the press people, those kind of people, they didn't even know we were military, so therefore sometimes they would treat us a little differently. A lot of people want to know what's such and such like, what was this person like, what was that person like. I have no bad stories, guys. I started jotting down a book that eventually I will publish when I am done flying, out of respect for the people that I take care of now, but it's going to be called Flying Through History, serving our nation's leaders at 41,000 feet. And I got to jump back to Albany Airport really quickly, because everyone always asks that. Besides, that day at the recruiter's office, my love of airplanes came from riding my bike to the airport and sitting outside and watching the airplanes take off. And one day in the 80s, President Reagan and then Vice President George H.W. Bush came into Albany to do some campaigning. And I saw Air Force One out there. And I thought, oh my God, that's Air Force One. That's the president. And I was like, that's the coolest thing ever. And it was. And it is. Trust me,
Yeah.
I don't take anything for granted. It is just as cool to walk on board that airplane as it was day one, as it was as an 11-year-old kid riding my bike to the airport. Little would
Yeah.
I know that eventually I would not only get to fly in that airplane and serve some of those people, but take care of people during President Reagan's funeral, bringing the president back out to Simi Valley for the burial. But more importantly, one of the last things that I did in the Air Force was I was the chief usher at President Herbert Walker Bush's funeral. So it's
Oh,
like a
wow.
full circle, literally going
Yeah.
from watching the airplane to eventually being able to fly on these beautiful blue and white airplanes. So it was just incredible. I can't tell you how good it was. I miss it every day. I miss the Air Force every single day. Mostly the people. I could make probably 20 phone calls right now to any of those guys that I served with, and they would be there for me. I mean, that's the nature
Yeah.
of being in the Air Force. And by the way, 4 days they were counting against me, 4 weeks, 4 months, 27
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
27 years.
I'm assuming you never wore your skids on Air Force One, right?
I didn't, man, but I still got one pair of skids. I still have one pair, and every now and then I'll throw them on. They still fit, and I still got my overalls that I used to wear at school dances that are airbrushed, and I still got my Colonie senior school shirt from our senior day. I still have that.
Okay.
I still wear that so often. I got my jacket. I've got my class ring. I mean. Yeah, it's
Cool.
Colonie is
Wow.
embedded as much as the Air Force is embedded in me.
Well, you got Colonie on Air Force One, so that's something I don't think anyone else can say. So that's
Yeah,
pretty awesome.
yeah.
But John, go ahead. I think I'm going to cut you off, so go ahead.
No, actually, so just two questions. One, not to be a buzzkill, but when 9/11 happened, where were you? Were you in
So
overseas
good
in London,
question,
England?
John. Actually, I had first applied to become a flight attendant. First found out about it before 9/11. So I was looking at the possibility of going for my interview September of 2001. It got pushed, obviously, as our world changed that day in so many different ways. So my wife and I, who was then my girlfriend, we were in Bali, Indonesia, on our fourth day of a 2-week vacation. So we were overseas on 9/11, which is incredible, really, because I was living overseas in England. We were in Indonesia, and so we really didn't see that re-Americanized version of the United States after 9/11 until I would have moved back in 2002. I mean, we had visited, but we didn't see it. And it was interesting to be overseas and see the reaction of foreigners to Americans. And it was very much like, oh, we're so sorry for your country. And so when a lot of people think that it was the loss of America, it was really the loss of the world. A lot of people died that day that weren't Americans. I just was in Missouri last week appearing at the Missouri Cherry Blossom Festival, which is a festival that I co-host every year. And we had the guy who climbed down 78 floors with his guide dog, blind, from Tower 2. He spoke about that day. Just amazing story. I had a very good friend of mine who was my first instructor on Air Force One, did my very first trip with then President Bush. He was on the airplane on 9/11. So he described what it was like that day going down to Florida. They had started that trip the day before, so they were on a couple-day trip. Just amazing. And everyone, of course, has their moments of where they were on that particular day. But we were in Indonesia, and then I would not get hired until a year later.
Wow. And so following up, out of all the presidents you worked with, who was the coolest president on Air Force One?
That is a question I could never answer. Not because I couldn't answer it, but because I literally don't have a bad story about the VIPs that I traveled with. Whether it was former presidents or, members of Congress or members of the president's cabinet, I don't have a bad story. They were never the problem. It was always the guys in the back of the airplane. I'm with you and you're the VIP, so that makes me important. The press guys were a lot of work sometimes. They were the ones who usually gave us the most problems because it's an entitled thing. They get to be traveled with the president or they're traveling with the first lady. I remember once I told the press lady, we were up in New Hampshire with Mrs. Bush, and we had packed the airplane, and part of the job as a flight attendant was to pack up the back of the airplane, the luggage. And here she comes. We're waiting for the first lady to arrive, and here she comes with her golf bag. And she's like, hey, I need to put this on the airplane. And there was no more room. When you travel with the first lady or the vice president or anybody else for that matter, you're traveling heavily armed for the agents and all of their luggage. There was no room for a bag on that airplane. And I had to tell her, no, I'm sorry, you're going to have to ship that back to Washington. Well, no, I need to take this with me. Well, you can tell the first lady she can take her bags off and you can then take your golf bag, or we can leave it here and somebody can make arrangements to have it shipped back. You can pick whichever one. So she didn't like that answer, but needless to say, she's now a national reporter, and I won't mention her name. I never tell bad stories about people because you never know if somebody likes somebody and you don't want to ruin their outlook. I will tell you, remember Chris Capastrassi? Remember her? So she went to a national platform. Yeah, and she ended up traveling with us a few times. Yeah, so that was kind of cool being, as a homegirl, homegirl gone good kind of stuff, So awesome. I have great stories about everybody. I loved taking care of Mrs. Bush. Mrs. Obama was really, really nice. Mrs. Trump was very quiet. She was a very quiet and sort of reserved first lady. I loved then Vice President Biden. He was great. He was great to all of us. We called him Uncle Joe, behind his back, of course. We never called it to his face. But he was great. But then I will tell you that President Trump was incredibly respectful to all the military. Everybody at the White House. One of my best friends works down at the White House as the chief of one of the chiefs down there of Air Force. WACA, which is basically they take care of all the president's speeches and all kinds of stuff like that. White House Communication Agency. And again, he said the Trumps were fantastic to everybody down at the White House. The Obamas had a very big staff. Therefore, the staff, again, sometimes the staff is the problem. Whereas Mrs. Bush had a very small staff. So she used our small airplane quite a bit. But all great stories, guys. And stories are plentiful. Trust me.
Okay. So actually, just one last question here. Out of all the places you visited, what's the one place you said, I need to go back to that country? What would it be?
Yeah, I really enjoyed Australia. And a lot of times we have this, we have this feeling about a place like, oh, I want to go there. And then we go there and it's a disappointment. And I use Egypt, Cairo, as a perfect example. You think of the pyramids as this mystical, magical place on high, out there by themselves. And as you look at them in the desert, the pyramids and the Sphinx and the Great Pyramid of Giza, they do look mystical and magical. But behind you is Burger King and KFC, literally across the street from the Great Pyramids of Giza. So, and it's really dirty. Cairo is one of those cities that is extremely, extremely dirty. So a little bit of a disappointment. I was happy to be able to see it as many times as I've been there. And certainly happy to go to some of the other places, the Great Wall of China and Beijing. I was there in 2008 with President Bush for the Olympics and things like that. Australia Sydney was definitely a great place. It was exactly as I pictured it. So I enjoyed that. But yeah, I've loved everywhere. And the number one question, one of the number one questions is what do we do when we're on the ground, when the airplane is put to bed, the passengers have left? It's our time. It's our time to become tourists. It's our time to enjoy the culture of the areas that we're in. Always remembering that you are representing not only the Air Force, but also that person that you brought in. So, it's a matter of keeping that level of respect, keeping that level of dignity, all that stuff, because the eyes of the world are watching all of us at any given time. And now, especially with social media, man, oh man, they got those air crew members, my friends at Andrews they have a really, really tough job.
Yeah.
Wow.
Let's transition into like post-military life. So what was your last year in the military?
Yeah.
And then what have kind of been some of the highlights of your life since then at a high level? I know you got a lot going on.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, it's amazing how things happen. In 2019, I was working for a 3-star general out of the Pentagon, and I was basically the superintendent of Air Force protocol, kind of running parties and doing that kind of stuff on the ground. I had my flying career, but I was only flying for what they call currency. And at that point, I had made it to the 2 percentile in the military. Senior Master Sergeant, which is an E8. 2% of the military, the Air Force, will ever make E8, and only 1% will ever make E9. It's 2019. I just was going to a party at my boss's house on Bowling Air Force Base that we were hosting, and I get a call from again, former supervisor. A guy that had retired 15 years before me was one of my first instructors at Andrews, taught me how to be a flight attendant, taught me everything there was about VIP travel. And he said, "Hey man, what are you doing?" And I was like, "Oh, Ron, I'm going to 30 years. I want to do 30 years. I want to make chief, which is E9, and I'm loving life, and things are good. We had our boy, and we built our home in Southern Maryland, and I loved living in the nation's capital. It was a great place to live." And he goes, "Well, Rich, nobody cares about what rank you are when you get out. All they care about is your service." And just like what you said to me before, you said, "Thank you for your service." Thank you for saying that. I always, the answer to that question is, or that statement is always, it is an honor to serve, because it is. It is an honor to serve. I certainly appreciate anybody saying it, but the honor is all mine. I love it. I love the fact that I got to be in the military. I love the fact that I got to be in the greatest Air Force in the nation, in the world. You cut my veins and I bleed blue. I don't bleed red. So he called me and said, "Hey man, why don't you come? I'm thinking about retiring." He had retired 15 years before I did. And he said, "I'm thinking about retiring from this current job, from this current owner, flying private." And I went, flew with them, and they liked me. So I hit the button. I went back, told that 3-star, "Hey, sir, we had just done another party at his house. I just let the last person out the door, which was the chief of staff of the Air Force, locked the door, turned around and said, 'Sir, I got to talk to you.' And he said, 'Do I need a drink?' I said, 'I'll pour it for you.' Went behind his bar, poured him a drink, and said, 'I'm going to retire.' He said, 'No, you're not.' And when a 3-star general tells you you're not going to do something, you don't want to fight with him. But I said, 'Sir, I got the one phone call that I think I'm never going to get again. And it might be time to let somebody else go and have as much fun as I've had and come up the ranks.' And I told him, and he helped me, which is amazing, because it usually takes a military member, especially one that has been in that long, about a year to retire. But because of who I worked for, he helped me not only become retired in a matter of about 3 months, but have a great retirement ceremony, which you can find online on YouTube, by the way, and an amazing retirement ceremony in an airplane hangar with the airplanes, and he had it all done within, like I said, that 4-month time frame, which brought me to my current position as a private aircrew member. So I'm still doing the same thing that I was doing in the Air Force, but instead of for government and for our nation's leaders, I'm doing it for private individuals who own their own airplanes, or who are using airplanes that are contracted out or whatever. So I was attached to an owner for 5 years, almost 5 years, that matter, and was with them for a real long time, and just left that owner in December to become a full-time contract person. So I was gone way too much, and it was 2 weeks on and 2 weeks off, and some of those 2 weeks kind of filtered off into 3 weeks, and some even longer. And I already had my career, and now I just needed a job. I just needed something to pay the bills, and I always say it'll never be as good as it was. Just like Colonie, no matter where you guys live, no matter where we live, we're always going to be kids from Colonie. No matter what, it's never going to be as good as it was. The malls are never going to be as good. The times together, the moments that you're sharing with your friends now, they're never going to compare to those moments that we shared in high school. And that's why I love the fact that of doing what you guys are doing, because it allows us to relive those memories, and more importantly, find out what everybody's doing, but what we growing up in the American city, Colonie, affected all of us. So, I always say that I always look back at the Air Force. It's never going to be that good, no matter what I do. But I get to fly private now, so I'm just flying private and working for whoever wants me to fly trips. And I'm doing a lot of trips out of Los Angeles right now. So knowing the type of people that are in LA, you can kind of figure out the kind of people that that I have taken care of. I'm under lots of different NDAs, so I can't talk about it, which is crazy because in the military, I never signed an NDA. Ever. You know why?
Really?
Never. Because it's embedded. It's embedded. We're not going to talk. That book that I told you that I'm going to write eventually and publish eventually, there's not going to be any tell-alls in there. It's going to be about that 11-year-old kid that was riding his bike at the airport one day, and then eventually got to fly in the blue and white airplanes and do the greatest job in the Air Force. It's going to be about service to the country, and it's going to be fun stories about our nation's leaders that people would love to read. There's not going to be any tell-all. There's not going to be any negative stories. And and I don't have any politics. It's about the seal.
Right.
The presidency is about the seal. And what most Americans should know and understand, especially during an election year, is it's about that seal. And once the election is done, you should respect the seal and the office in which it represents. And the person behind the seal needs to have be behind and have our nation represent them and respect them, no matter what there is. There's always a chance for a new party, there's always a chance for a new election. And that's what you kind of have to look at. So I don't have politics. I've served Republicans, I've served Democrats, and they've all been great.
Mm. Awesome.
And let me ask you
Awesome.
this question. One, no, that's outstanding, everything you said. So how do we get to the Hall of Fame, Colony Central Hall of Fame? How did that all happen?
Oh my God, it's amazing. So you can see my plaque is right here. It's so this is how much being a member of the Hall of Fame means to me. So we are in the area of my building, which is dedicated to my military career. You can't really see it. I'll kind of pan down, but that is a seat from President Reagan's Air Force One. When they retired that airplane and brought it up to Simi Valley, the maintenance guys gave me a chance to get one of the seats out of it because it was going to be trashed because they needed to make room on the airplane for it being on static display at the museum. But my induction into the Hall of Fame means as much to me as it does being a member of the Air Force. So it's in my Air Force area. My uncle, family friend / uncle, unbeknownst to me, was like nominating me for like 10 years. And I had no idea. In the it was an honorary inductee in the service category. So humanitarian and service for the community is the category that I was inducted for in 2022. And what an honor! Like that plaque, the twin brother to that plaque is hanging in the main hallway in our high school. I mean, it's
Oh, nice.
That's
dude,
awesome.
I'm a kid
Congratulations
from
on
Albany,
that.
New York, and I get to be,
Yeah.
the kid who got almost his butt kicked every day in that hallway. I get to be in
Right.
that hallway now for a lot of the
Well,
kids.
you're in the
They get to
hallway
see.
for sure,
Yeah,
permanently now. So
yeah.
that's awesome. Congratulations on
Thank you.
that.
Thank you.
Maybe this is a good time. You mentioned some of the people like around when you graduated that went into the military or law enforcement and in some form or the other. Why don't you give a shout out to all of them right now? List as many as you can because we don't get really
Oh
an
my
opportunity
gosh.
to do this. But we thank you for your service. But this would be a great opportunity to
Yeah,
thank all
yeah,
of them on
definitely.
live on YouTube or recorded on YouTube. So just list them all and then we'll go from there.
My brother, Jeff Clark, who is my best friend since we were little kids in Forest Park. Jeff and I see each other all the time because my job takes me to Las Vegas all the time. My family and I were just out there. I just got off the phone with him an hour ago. We call each other a few times a week. His father and mother were like my parents, and so
Yeah.
Jeff Clark has the greatest amount of respect. I got to get him in the Hall of Fame because he's done so much for the law enforcement community and continues to do so. Jay DePaulo is a colony cop right now to this day, and Jay and I grew up together. Kenny Switek, hey Kenny, if you want to talk about a guy who has the biggest heart of gold, who was like a major burnout, Kenny Switek was the least friend that anybody, the opposite of me, but he and I were great friends. He's got a heart of gold. He doesn't go to funerals, and he came to my grandmother's funeral, which I was so happy for. John Papa, who is down in Florida with his family, Colleen and their kids. John worked for Disney for a long time, an amazingly unbelievable guy, who's super smart. Love John Papa. Adam Knapp, RIP. Rest in peace, Adam. We lost him way too soon, and that just goes to show you that it's important to get out there and talk to people. It's important to get help if you need help. We all need it. Every one of us needs it. So call somebody, call a friend, call a former high school person if you need to. Adam and I used to sing together. We worked together. We slept together in the same bed sometimes when we would sleep over each other's houses. I mean, he is. He's a loss that is just incredible that I'll feel forever. George Stolas was in the band with Adam, Fat Mookin. Those guys were a great local band. Let's see, Freddie Bouye. I mentioned Freddie. So he was out there. Tom Casey, my boy, Tom Casey. I love that guy. Tom was at the the ceremony. Mr. Casey, Brian Casey, was another father figure for me. He is the reason another reason I'm in the Hall of Fame. His exact words to the committee were, if this guy doesn't epitomize what service is to both his town and to our country, then I don't know what is. So thank you,
Awesome.
Brian Casey, for at least recognizing that. There are so many. And I mentioned Facebook. I love the fact that we can connect on Facebook.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for having me on. We connected on Facebook. I campaigned a little bit more because I was like, I love what you guys are doing. Plus, I'm a little bit of a showman. I have to say, I want to be out there, but more importantly, there's a brand that I want to see built, and that's the Colonie brand. And I think that you
Yeah.
guys are doing something great that can help build that brand, and bring recognition to it. I mentioned it I mention it anytime I can. I'm a kid
Yeah.
from Albany, New York. I say that over and
Right.
over again. So
Yeah.
it's awesome.
No, that's great, and those are great shout outs. And I'll just throw a couple other names out there who I know have served in some form or the other. I think we got Warren Gettings, Marine, Sean Pratt, Marine,
Sean Pratt, yeah,
Kevin Kennedy, who's a few years younger than us. I believe he was U.S. Army.
yep,
And then obviously I have to thank John and his brother for serving on
yeah,
the U.S. Border Patrol. So
yeah.
thank you all. And there's many more. And I don't mean to exclude anyone, but this is a good opportunity to at least give some recognition.
And
With
also
that,
too,
John, do we want?
the family serves with the military member. Let's not forget them.
Yeah.
They serve.
Yep.
I noticed you
Absolutely.
you had a family on a couple weeks ago,
Yeah.
a group, and but the family, my wife served with me. She continues to do so. They
Right.
have to put up with a lot. The kids have to put up with a lot. Military kids have to put up with their dad and their mom being gone. So the family, the retirement ceremony is actually not about the member. It's actually about the family.
Yeah.
It celebrates the family and the fact that they've sacrificed as much as the military member. So thank you to them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Wrapping up here, let's just kind of go rapid fire with some colony this or that questions. I'll lead off. And I think we already maybe have known you may have given this answer earlier, but Elkins or Platt's Place?
Elkins, all the way. Although
Yeah.
I knew the owner of Platt's Place. He was a great guy. And they
Yeah.
certainly had great ice cream. But man, I could walk to Elkins and they had great French fries. And then so it was only a couple streets away. That's a loss, by the way, of Colonie. That is
It
a
is. It is.
huge loss. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Good, John.
All right, here we go. Ground Round or the Cranberry Bog?
Oh, two great places. But I love the Ground Round, especially after school dances, at both Sand Creek dances and also the high school dances. Did you guys go to the dances? I was a dance guy, man. I was in the middle, in the circles, and
Yeah.
there's
You were in the
videos
colony
out there.
pit, probably. You
There's
were in the
video in
colony
the
pit
pit.
doing the dance.
Yes, in the
Yeah.
pit.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
remember MTV actually came to the high school and did an MTV video dance. That is actually out
Oh,
there. If you search Colony Central High School MTV dance, you will find the video. And Jeff is going to kill me because Jeff is featured so well dancing in this video.
Yeah.
So yeah, the dances. But Ground Round would
oh
have been the
wow,
answer to that question.
All right,
nice.
cool. Ted's fish fry or Bob and Ron's fish fry
Oh
or
man,
somewhere else? Were you a
Tracy
fish fry
DeLeonardis.
guy?
Tracy DeLeonardis and Paul DeLeonardis are friends. Tracy was in my class, so Bob and Ron's, I would say. Ted's was my grandmother's favorite. So for that matter, I would definitely like Ted's to take her, but Bob and Ron's. I mean, I got to give it out. Shout out to the DeLeonardis family. They ran that place for a long time.
Cool.
Yeah, nice. All right, so here it is. This question is: you just turned 21. Obviously, I think you were at that time in the Air Force. But
Yeah.
let's say you're not. You're in Colony. Where are we going to find you at? Ziggy's in Latham, Michael's, WT's, Tommy's, the Heritage, the Big House, Washington Tavern, or the Rusty Nail?
Probably Michael's. I remember going there when it was a dance club. They had that little dance club for on 18 or 21 and under. So probably Michael's just to see what it was like. But
Cool.
yeah, I mean, remember September's? I mean, now obviously it's an adult entertainment place, but September's in the early days.
Yeah.
Sal DiCarlo was a family friend, so I remember the early days of September. What it before, when Mike Tyson used to go there every Saturday night.
Yep.
I worked at the A-Frame diner for a long time, washing dishes on Saturday night at one point I had like 4 jobs at one point in high school, and the A-frame on Saturday night was a dishwasher. So I used to ride my bike there, and at nighttime I would stop by the club, which was backstage, I think at the time, and see if Mike Tyson's car was parked behind. He would either have the Lamborghini Jeep or the Mercedes, one of the Mercedes convertibles. And I remember one night being in the kitchen with Sal, and Mike came in the kitchen. Of course, Mike was the heavyweight champion of the world, and you guys remember what Albany was like when Mike Tyson was the heavyweight champion of the world. Mike came in the kitchen and was like, "Oh man, you can't ride your bike home this late at night." He put the bike in the back of the Lamborghini LM002 and drove me home. So that was a great night. Yeah, I got driven home by the then heavyweight champion of the world. And I've since seen Mike in Vegas, and I saw him about 5 years ago, and he remembers all those stories from Albany.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's, you know what, we're going to end it on the Mike Tyson Lamborghini story, because I don't know if it gets, any crazier than that going down memory lane.
Yeah.
But Rich, thank you for sharing all your stories. Thank you for your service. It's a great story about a kid who, used to work in his place in Colony Center and didn't have much of maybe an idea of exactly what he wanted to do out of high school, but ended up on Air Force One and did all kinds of other great stuff. So thank you very much for coming up on the show, and for all our viewers out there, please like, subscribe, follow, share, so we can keep this momentum going on with the Colony Pit.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
You very much.
I appreciate the time.
Thanks,
it really
Rich.
means a lot, and keep doing what you're doing.
All right. Thanks, Rich.
Thanks, Rich.
Thanks.